whole series of half-past autumn programs. Wichita had one. The first one was in the Cochran Gallery in Washington, and we opened up with about maybe 100 invitations for a few of Gordon's friends. And then they opened the front doors and 5,000 people came through. And that was the first one, and it just went. Next was in New York City, and everybody that you'd expect to see in New York was there. And then they had a number of others. And I was at the one in Atlanta, the one in Wichita, and this one was the most incredible one of all. This is the Oakland East Bay Symphony. And they opened it by playing a couple of Gordon's favorite classical pieces by Rachmaninoff and Leonard Bernstein. And then everything after that, this is all Gordon Parks' music, all of this. And his piano concerto, which is on here, which he plays on here, it was first played in Moyle Italy. And so, you know, but this was an incredible program. I mean, absolutely incredible program in Oakland. And it was part of there were like 9 different cities that the large book, the blue cover on it called Half-Past Autumn. It was incredible. I think the last time I checked, I think it had gone through the 5th printing of that book. Yeah. He was a great man.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to officially start. We hope you enjoyed the reception. That was an opportunity for you to meet David Parks and Mr. McAfee, so that afterwards, our session, if you have to leave, you can go on and you will have had private time. You might have a little more time. I'm Wilma Moore Black. I am the principal investigator and director of the College Access Challenge Grant funded by the Kansas Board of Regents. And that's a grant that I've written that's on top of our federal grant for TRIO Communication Over Bound, a pre-college program for high school students in the area. And Gordon's very special, a Kansan filmmaker, author, photographer, all the things that we're trying to teach our students. So we piggybacked off the fact that David was down in Fort Scott, Kansas last weekend for the annual Gordon Park Celebration Days. And he's traveled here. Great highlight of today for us, wearing our shirts and all. This is Demetria Wilson, project coordinator for the grant, was that David was at Gordon Parks Academy this morning. Very anxious, excited, energetic, 410 elementary students in the auditorium. Excited that he was here, the son of the person whose namesake is for the school. So we want to now, at this time, without further ado, let the program begin. We are proud to have Mr. McAfee, who's our architect and businessman guru, and David, filmmaker, writer, and director. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn it over to them. When we finish, there will be questions and answers. Questions, and they'll have answers for you. And just be relaxed. You can have your drinks here and be comfortable here in the Marcus Welcome Center Theater Auditorium.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Wilma and Demetri and the staff for putting all of this together. They've been working us hard, but it's been worthwhile. Especially this morning. Can you hear me? You hear me? No. Can you hear me? Especially over there at the Gordon Parks Academy, it was really special. And it was a good thing it was 8:30 in the morning, because if it was in the afternoon, I'd probably choke. But I was so tired from the night before. Thanks to Mr. Mike Roach having me over for dinner. Johnny Walker Red. was one of those nights. But anyway, it was really, really special. Dad has at least 14 schools across the country that have been built since he's passed. And prior to him passing, they had already built about 8 schools across the country in his name. One's in Kansas City. That was built before Dad passed. One's in Morristown, New Jersey. One's in Queens, New York. One's in St. Paul or Minneapolis, Minnesota. Is that right?
I believe it's St. Paul.
Is it St. Paul?
I believe so.
Okay. It's maybe years from St. Paul. And $20 million high school. Nice. And now the academy here. And it's really very special to be in a building named after your father and the legacy of his work being carried on to young students from kindergarten to 8th grade, right? 8th grade, or KD. And those questions were tough. I showed some of the learning tree, and they hit me with some serious questions about what it was like back in the 1916s, 1920, going to school here in Kansas. Because the learning tree is growing up in Fort Scott. And I guess a lot of people have seen it. It's on every year on TV. It's a classic. It's on TMC a couple weeks ago, HBO were in it. They had all the Parks films, my brother's films, on a couple of weeks ago on HBO and TMC. So they're doing pretty good. They got longevity. So, but it was just real special to talk to those kids today. It was really nice. Charlie, you got something to say?
A few years back when I was 40 pounds lighter and played tennis every day, I played in a national tennis tournament in New Orleans. And at this tennis tournament was Arthur Ashe, Bill Cosby, and Gordon Parks. And one of the most important individuals that I met when I first came back to Wichita and got a job downtown, there was this elegant man. He was always immaculately dressed, with a neat little hat on, carried a little briefcase. And I ended up serving on the YMCA board with him. It was Clemmy Parks, it was Gordon's older brother. And so we formed a great friendship at that point. And I knew all the Parks family here in town. So when I was down in New Orleans, I said, I'm from Wichita, and I know all your relatives. He said, why don't we have dinner tonight? Well, his grandson, Elaine, was with him. And so the three of us went and had dinner. I said, Gordon, I just finished doing this museum at Wichita State University, McAfee Art Center. And you ought to come there and do a one-man show. I am never coming back to Kansas. I said, oh. Well, before cell phones, I said, excuse me a minute. I got up and went to the phone. And I called Professor Bobby Humphrey. I said, Bobby, I am having dinner with Gordon Parks. She said, oh, Charlie, he will not answer our letters. He will not answer our phone calls. I said, I'd like to talk him into coming and doing a show at McKnight. So she said, you call Martin Bush. I called Martin Bush. Martin Bush said, any day second semester. So I went back to the dinner table. I said, Gordon, I got it all set up for you for a second semester at Wichita State. He said, you really want me to do that? I don't want to go back to Kansas. I said, I really want this, my building. I'd really love for you to do it. So he agreed to do it. And he came back. And the show just grew and grew and grew and grew. And so I got to spend so much time with this guy. He was like a big brother to me. And we formed a great friendship.
Matter of fact, Charlie was at all the half-past autumn shows, just about, except the one in St. Paul.
Right.
And the one in St. Paul was beautiful. they did it in this museum. Were you there?
No,
No.
I've been to Kansas for 60 years.
Oh, wow, all right, sorry. But it was in a beautiful museum,
Right.
and they did play his music at that. And but Charlie was at every one of my. I pretty much was called in for security purposes to help get him through the crowds and everything. Take some of the slack off. That was fun.
Yeah, half the time I became his bodyguard.
It was,
Because, you know, like, the air conditioning broke down in New York, and everybody was in there just sweating, but everybody was crowding around going,
yeah.
I said, we gotta stop this. You know? And times when he would come here, they would have him on one program, then he would meet another group of students, then he'd have lunch with another group of students, then he'd be interviewed at the radio station. And I mean, it just went on like that, you know. Someplace along the line, I made a lot of people mad. I said, well, he needs some rest. Let's wait. He would call me Champ. He'd say, Champ, what are you doing? I said, what do you want? Many stories like that. Many times he called me. One time he called me and says, when you coming to New York? So what do you want? I want you to come up here. Okay. So I flew up to New York, stayed at the hotel right across from the United Nations, because where he stayed was the two black tower buildings off the grassy United Nations was where he stayed, United Nations Plaza. And so when I got there, I called him, I said, I'm here. He said, put your tennis shoes on. I said, wait a minute, we're gonna play tennis tonight? He said, no, we're gonna walk. I said, all right. So when I got downstairs, he was coming down. I said, where are we going? Grand Central Station. Grand Central Station, okay. So we started walking, we got to the doors, and I was getting ready to go. He said, you can't go in that way. I said, there's nothing on the doors that say I can't go in. No, you gotta walk all the way around. So we walked all the way around. For those of you who've been to New York,
That was a Vanderbilt.
the huge promenade stairs. We walk in the doors, and he stands at the top of the stairs and crosses his arms like this, and looks, and all the way across Grand Central Station, 20 feet high, 65 feet long, was a reproduction of one of his photographs that announced the high music category of contemporary photographs that he did. And he's standing there. And I looked over and I said, you're sick. And he would do this kind of stuff to me all the time. One of the time he called me up and he said, when you coming to New York? I said, when you need me there? Day after tomorrow, okay. So I flew up there and we went into the study, and he was playing something that he'd recorded on the keyboard. And I listened to it and I thought, I've heard that before. What is that? He said, it's the ballet of Martin Luther King. I said, the what? I said, you're doing a ballet now? Yeah. Okay. He opened the ballet of Martin Luther King in the East Wing, the building designed by I.M. Day, next to the National Art Gallery in Washington. It was packed. A couple of people from the Dillon's family were there, plus one other person from Hutchinson. Senator Castleman was there, and I was there. We were the 5 people that represented Kansas. Now what was really interesting was, all 3 of his wives were there. Now, that's another whole story. But every time all 3 of his wives showed up, for some reason they all were sitting behind me. And I'm going like, I don't think I like sitting here.
He had a way of keeping everybody mellow. I mean, having 3 wives in one place, getting along. He was good. Yeah. You have to remember one thing though. He was the Renaissance man of New York. That was his title in New York City, and he would go out. We would go out on the street, and there were bums that were on the street. They would walk up to him and say, Mr. Parks, I don't want any money. I just want to shake your hand and tell you that I really appreciate what you have done as an artist appreciate it, he'd pull out a 20, I mean, that's the way he was. But he couldn't go anywhere in New York where they wouldn't know. They would know. So.
One time we were coming out of downtown, the tennis court was on top of one of the parking garages. And we were coming out of there and we were both walking back to his place. And everybody on the street,
It was rough.
I mean, that was just the way it was if you were with him. One time, Cheryl and I, my oldest daughter, were there, and Cheryl had her camera. We were walking down Fifth Avenue, and Gordon was telling Cheryl how to hold the camera, what to look at, what to take. And while he's giving Cheryl these lessons, everybody's going by. Hello, Mr. Parks. Hi, Gordon. Hello, Mr. Parks. You know, and I'm going like, okay, you're not going to run for anything, are you?
I mean, the old man, well, we actually lived in New York for 30 years. I did anyway. Finally got out of it. But I live in Texas right now. But the thing about everybody loved Gordon in New York. I mean, he was the man in New York. And of course, having worked for Life magazine, we shot Shaft there. I worked on that film. We shot Super Cops. We shot, oh God, I don't know how many films we shot. I've worked on so many of his, and my brother, Gordon Parks Jr., we did a film called Superfly. And so we spent a good 15 years shooting films. So everybody knew us. Cops knew us. The bums knew us. Everybody knew us. I mean, we had it was kind of, New York was our oyster. They all looked out after us. You know, I mean, it was a kind of a big family, you know. And I must say, for me, having been around the old man since I was a kid, carrying his bags, loading his cameras, going around to various places of the world. I think I was at least halfway around the world by the time I was 10, just when Life magazine was going full blast. It was incredible, and I can't tell you what he has done for me. I'm going to show you some of my work that I did with Gordon on some of his films, some of my brother's films. I'll show you in a little while some stuff that can just give you an idea of what we were doing.
One of the things that, you know, you really get involved with this guy, like when David was saying that New York was their oyster. I'm certain he's the only individual who got the key to the city of New York 2 years in a row. I don't know how you do that. One of those times, Dina Merrill, who terrific star in her own right, married to a guy named Hartley. And Dina lived in the same building with Gordon. In fact, Fred Cope lives in the same building.
That was a party in building. It was a party building.
And
Gloria Vanderbilt went there.
Mrs. Robert Kennedy lived there. It's an interesting place.
Walter Cronkite.
It's an interesting place to walk
Parties
around the
all.
halls. But anyway, I told Dina, I said, I've written this program to do the Gordon Parks Creative Center at Wichita State University. And she said, what's the budget? I said, around $25 million. So when you get ready to do it, you call me. We never got that done. But there were all kinds of things like this that were going on all the time. One time he called me and he said, what are you doing next week? I said, what do you want? I'd always say, what do you want? Because I knew I was getting ready to hear it anyway. He said, well, IBM has me out in San Diego lecturing to their executive group every morning for a week. So why don't you come out and we'll play tennis in the afternoon? Well, I had just finished a huge house out in San Diego. Well, I'd done 150 apartments for this family, and their residence burned. I didn't do it. Their residence burned. They called me out and asked me to come design their house. Well, it's a marvelous family. Husband, wife, three very attractive young men. And when they were going to build it back where the house burned, well, all three of the boys said, Daddy, we're almost at the age now, we're all married, and we'd like to build houses too. And Daddy's comment was, I like you, but I don't like you that much. So we bought this 40-acre site. They own a granite quarry. We cut about 6 inches of granite a year. That's all they do. Well, I did this house, and it was in San Diego, so it gave me an excuse, you know, to spend a whole week in San Diego with Gordon playing tennis. And we would just do stuff like this, you know, nothing heavy, just easy.
He was a good tennisman. I didn't beat him until he was 65. That's how good he was.
Yeah, yeah.
He says, you know, you finally arrived. He said, that's the hardest match you'll ever play in your life. He was absolutely right.
When he would come to Wichita, I'd take him down to McAfee Park. And the kids down there just loved it. And Mr. Parks is out here playing tennis, you know. And he loved doing stuff like that. And he met no strangers. That was a beautiful part about this man. He didn't meet any strangers.
Yeah, and I guess you all know all his writings are here at the library. You know that? I don't even think they've gotten through half the boxes. Yeah, I mean, he kept everything, all right? He kept every letter. Yes?
The collection's been processed for 3 years, and the finding aid is online.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Lorraine
Well,
Mathey.
thanks for letting me know.
And there's a digital collection as well.
Oh, beautiful. Well, this lady back here is involved with the archive?
Yeah,
Yeah, she's the person.
Oh, right. I'd like to talk to you. Yeah.
pleasure.
We were there on a couple of occasions, opening boxes, seeing what's in there, you know, and there's always something in, I mean, whether it's old record albums or a letter, handwritten letter that he'd written to somebody or something of that nature. That's what Wichita State has. And what I'm really hoping one of these days, especially now that the new president is closing the golf course, I'd like to envision that there would be a creative center at Gordon Parks out on that golf course somewhere, so that you could really exhibit. The one thing that I think is so important about this man, I used to ask him, I said, Gordon, why did you do so many things? And he would say, well, if I only did one thing, they could shut me down. But I did so many things, they didn't know what I was doing when I was doing it, you know. And that was really true because, I mean, even as well as I knew him and as long as I had known him, when he did that thing with me on the ballet to Martin Luther King, I mean, I was dumbfounded.
Okay, you know what?
Public?
Yeah, I was there at the house after they had released the Martin ballet, and he was on the phone. He got a call from a newspaper in Cleveland or something, and the guy was yelling, "What gives you the right to do a ballet?" and the old man looks at me, you know, and I said, "What happened, Pops?" And he says, "Guy says, what gives me the right to do a ballet?" He says, "Because I want to do it." You know, I mean, that's the way he was, you know. I mean, critics are rough, you know, they're always looking for a loophole. And Gordon has a very good track record in regards to what he has done and accomplished. I worked on at least 20 films in Hollywood, in New York, in Europe. And you hear people on the crew always having something negative to say about the director or the producer. Never once ever heard anything negative about my father's behavior on a movie set. I mean, people didn't know I was his son. I mean, that's the way we worked it anyway. Security was a good deal. You have to be very secure, especially on the streets of New York. When you're shooting in New York, you have to be very careful. It's very dangerous and all kinds of things. But I worked for Martin Ritt. I worked for Paul Williams. I worked for Ed Dimitri. Matter of fact, I was in film before Dad and my brother were in film. I worked as a gopher for Ed Dimitri on Walk on the Wild Side. Now, Walk on the Wild Side is famous for a few things, but it was the first movie that had a soundtrack that went big time. It started the soundtrack. I think the organist,
Willie Smith, Jimmy Smith.
Jimmy Smith did the soundtrack, and that went huge. After that, everybody started doing soundtracks. You know, and soundtracks were getting recognized as a very important part of a movie. So I worked as a gopher for Ed Dimitri by mistake. I got suspended from school for smoking on Sunday at this boarding school I was going to. It was a Methodist school, so they sent me home. And I show up at the door, and the old man says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I got relieved for about 13, 14 days. And he says, "For what?" I said, "Smoking." "That's all?" It was on Sunday. "So what? This is costing me a lot of money, you know. So what am I going to do with it?" So he says, "Well, come on, I'm working on this Walk on the Wild Side, and just come on and we'll go on out to LA and stick with me." And so I did, but I was standing on set with Dad, holding the bags, carrying the cameras, and Ed Dimitri looks around. He says, "What are you doing here?" I said, I'm with my father, and I'm just watching how this is done. This is pretty. He says, "Nobody watches it. You got to work. You're on my set. You work." I said, "Okay, I'll work." Long story short, he sends me out to the electrical crew. And they said, we're out in the desert, in the Mojave Desert, and it's about 100 degrees, and they got me unrolling all these cables and hooking them up for the lights. So I spent the whole afternoon unloading these cables and everything. And then at around 4 or 5 o'clock, they said, "Roll them back up, we're not shooting anymore today." I said, okay. And they were sticking it to me because they knew I was Gordon's son. See, that's some of the problems they have being a son. So I rolled them back up. So the next day I end up on the set, and I'm standing right behind Ed Dimitri. And he looks around, he says, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be with the electrical crew." I said, "They're messing with me. I want to see how this is done." He says, "Okay, get in my seat." He put me in his director's seat. And I've been in one ever since. So that's how I started my career. And but having been around Dad and been around a lot of famous people, photographing for Life magazine. And Life magazine was a gas. I mean, he photographed Picasso, he photographed Alfred Hitchcock, and Ingrid Bergman. I mean, and I was with him on a lot of those assignments. So I had a chance to see a man work with icons. And so that was a good experience for me. And I thought maybe I'll show you some of my work. And yes, ma'am.
That was a cue.
That's a cue.
Idiot.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Let me say something right quick.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to tell a couple of stories. On the end of this half-past hour Oakland East Bay Symphony, Isaac Hayes comes out. And if you listen to what Isaac Hayes says about Gordon, he says it better than any of us. He comes out there and he says, I was never offered anything like this until Georgia Parks. I'm just a country boy from Tennessee. But the way it happened, tell them about that. You and Tony. Convincing the old man.
Oh, I come in from Texas, real quick. I come in from Texas, and there's all these boxes in the apartment. And I said, "Hey, Pops, what's all these boxes?" He says, "Well, the studio sent me this music that they want me to consider for Shaft." I said, "Oh, really?" "Yeah." So I look at the boxes, and it's Isaac Hayes. So I said to him, "Oh, Isaac Hayes, Hot Butter Soul. This guy's good." He said, "Really?" Because he never heard. So he said, "Well, that's what your sister said. He's good. So maybe I should listen to him." So he listened to a couple of his songs. He was sold. But he wasn't even going to listen to them. You know, he wasn't going to listen. Anyway, let's look at this. We'll get off the stage. This is some of my work that I worked on. Give you an idea that the apples don't fall too far from the tree. That's Gordon's music that he composed for Shaft's big score, which was the sequel to Shaft. And it was kind of funny. He composed all the music for the sequel, and that's some of the music he composed for Shaft's big score.
One of the first things that he did, he wrote in this, you'll see him play the piano, and he's playing the piano in this concerto. It was first played by the Milan Symphony Orchestra.
Wow.
Okay, so when you think about him from Fort Scott, don't, from Kansas, yeah. But it was just an incredible man who never ever looked back. He never ever believed that something wasn't possible. He always kept moving. I asked him one time, I said, "Why did you do so many things?" I think I said this to you, because they couldn't pin me down. And basically that was it. There's another story that I want, David to tell you. Tell him about when you came and Shaft was opening in New York and he was home. Tell him about that.
Well, we really didn't know what the audience was going to be like, the reaction to the film. All Shaft was a black Sam Spade. That's all it was. I mean, you all remember, or some of you might remember Sam Spade, which was a detective. And, you're in the studio dealing with these people, and nobody has a creative bone in their head. They only have money and trying to figure out how much money you can make. So it's not a very creative environment when you're talking to producers and everything. So you have to really, you don't know. But the night it opened on Broadway, everybody went crazy. It was lines around the block. And Dad, he just wanted up here, he just go down there and see what's going on. And man, they showed the movie all night. And the crowds just they couldn't get them out of the theater. They wouldn't leave, they wanted to see it again. And it was quite an experience. And after that, it just went crazy. It went wild. So Hollywood was the oyster then, and it was just a really good experience. I'll tell you one story that happened. The day the first day of the shoot in New York, it was 5 below zero. And we were up on this building down on Broadway, and we were stealing a shot. What I mean by that is, we didn't create the scene on the street. We took what was on the street and put the actor in it, and that's called stealing a shot. Where we didn't make the shot look like it was. And remember in Shaft, he comes out of the subway and comes up, and that music starts and everything. Well, it was 5 below zero that day. And we had been up on that top of that building since 5 o'clock, getting the cameras and everything. It was so cold, we had to go and buy heaters and put on the camera so it would roll. That's how bad it was. So finally, Gordon, you know, he very nice man. He says to Urs Ferreira, who's the DP, director of photography, he says, look, I don't want to put people through this. And Urs Ferreira said, Gordon, we've been here since 5 o'clock. We are going to shoot this shot. And sure enough, he says, okay, let's roll. And that was the first day of the shoot. And it was cold throughout the 6 weeks we shot that film. For the most part, we had a few warm days. But that's the kind of, and everybody wanted Gordon to make it. I mean, everybody, they donated their time and energy. So they wanted Gordon to do this, because this would be the film that not only make Richard Roundtree and MGM was broke. That film brought MGM out of a $15 million deficit. In 4 weeks, it had made over $30 million. And it has made $600 million to this day. And we only made it for $1.5 million. So that's how you make a living.
I want to go a little bit before the shot. You know, I've been fascinated by since I saw work of Henry Cartier-Bresson and your dad's work. It's kind of like the same, similar, and they work with the Time magazine together. And both of them are like big giant in their, photography world. Both of them, one from France and from the United States. So can you tell me some experience about the encounter with each other? How because both of them are like, when it comes to photography, wow.
Well, there's the.
They did work together, right, for a while, right?
Oh yeah, we knew Brassens and all those guys, but everybody was trying to capture the moment. That's what photography is all about. Capturing the moment, that moment of life.
And they were documentary, and that's why they were working for Time magazine. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And Dad did about 4 or 5 documentaries, and which he received about 3 Emmys. One on Perry Thomas, which was the writer in Harlem who wrote about Puerto Rican gangs, and he got an Emmy for that. What's funny is, I'm over there, you call me and come on up from Texas, man. Take a break. So I was up there, and the Library of Congress was there picking up, he donated all his works in the Library of Congress. Okay. So he said, oh, they take him down to the, locker and start pulling the films. And I would bring enough films to the apartment, and he says, what film is this? What is this? I mean, we had done so much that he didn't even remember the films he had done. And I had worked on a few of the documentaries too. And he just, well, when did we do this? It's just, he never stopped. He had one speed, forward. And he was that kind of person, but he did a lot of documentaries. He did Moments Without Proper Names, which is really fabulous. And I think he received an award for that.
Right. One of the things that I want to sort of go in this direction, one of Gordon's nieces called me one day and said, Charlie, you don't want to put Gordon on this? I said, no, what's the matter? Well, his sister, who lived here in Wichita, died. I said, I'll find him. So I made a couple of phone calls and found out he was at K-State giving a lecture. So I called him, got up with him. I told him what had happened. I said, I'm on my way, I'll get you. So I went up, picked him up, and we were coming back down, and the sun was getting ready to set. He said, stop the car. And we stopped the car and just leaned against the car and watched the Kansas sun set. That's the kind of guy this man was. I mean,
Tell the story where the guy said to Gordon, having seen the learning tree. Tell that story. That's
I used to get in so much trouble in this town, there's a couple people who know that. But people would ask me to do things because they couldn't do it, and then when I would do it, they'd get mad. Well, when I first got Gordon to come to Wichita, I picked him up at the airport. I said, I want you to promise me one thing. So what's that? Do not give me any credit for getting you back to Kansas. Okay. Well, we had this sort of private dining that evening, family members and a few others, down in the dining room at the Fort National Bank. And Dwight Button was the chairman of the board at that time. He said, Gordon, I read your book, The Learning Tree. Why did you ever leave Kansas? Gordon said, you read my book more than when I left it. And then he said, and if you want to know why I came back, thank Charles McAfee. Oh, God, here I go again. You know, but it was always, you know, something like that that happened. He would be in town and somebody called me and said, could you bring him over to the Kansas African American Museum? Yeah, we'll work that out. I'll take him over there. Got over and this one woman said, who invited him?
you know,
but it was always, you know, these kind of crazy things that would happen. This guy took it so smooth. I never saw him really angry. One time, he called me up and he said, say, Champ, I want you to go over to the museum and look at some of the prints that just came back from touring Europe. I said, what's the matter? I said, well, this curator that they got says the prints were done on acid paper. He said, like Magazine did those prints. There was no acid paper in it. I didn't know what acid paper was. So I said, okay, I'll go over there. So I got over there. This guy's got a couple of them up on the wall. He's got a flashlight right up on him, about 6 inches away, and he's looking and he sees little hairline cracks in the glass. He said, see? I said, wait a minute, first of all, nobody looks at a picture like that. I said, and in addition to that, you may not know that I know the university got, I think, $17,000 for any repairs that needed to be done. And I think they got either $25,000 or $35,000 as a fee for letting it tour Europe. I don't know what this guy's problem was, but he got, Dr. Hughes had just got me, maybe 2 weeks. So he wrote this letter, took it over to Dr. Hughes, told Dr. Hughes what the problem was. Dr. Hughes signed the letter. This guy uncrates, takes everything out of frames, puts them in a box and ships them to a storage place in New York. Now, you see, Gordon's one of those kind of people, and I'm one of those kind of people. Anytime you say something bad, I'm always looking at something good's going to happen. What happened with that was Time Warner and Ford Motor Company, I think they each put up $1 million.
right.
And that created the book called Half-Past Off. And like I said, the last time I checked, it was the 5th printing was sold out. And I mean, it's such an incredible volume of things. And, you know, and then when Wichita State had to go back and really bid to get what they already had, it was really kind of sad. But
I'll tell you this.
He wasn't mad.
No.
He wasn't mad.
He was cool. I'll tell you a little, since this is a personal. I'll tell you, the night Malcolm X was killed, Dad, we were up in the country, and Dad says, come on, we take the car, go down to the city. So we went down to Harlem, because Malcolm called Dad, and Dad and Malcolm were real tight. And we go down to this hotel in 7th Avenue, and we pull up. I said, well, why did you bring me down here? He says, you're going to sit in the car so nobody steals it. What happens when you steal a car and me too? I'll catch up with you. But you sit in the car and, you know, so I did. He went up there, Dad was one of the last people to see Malcolm, you know, before he was killed the next day.
Well, the worst part about that story is,
But let me finish. So that, they caught the Muslims getting on the plane in Chicago. And they were getting ready to come and get Gordon, because he wrote the story, a special for Life magazine. And Dad pretty much pointed his finger at the Muslims on this deal. So they caught them getting on the plane, and they caught some other people. They were going to get the family. So Life magazine sent us off to Jamaica, or I think it was Jamaica. No, Puerto Rico. And we were down there for like 2 months, 2-3 months, and they were still picking them up, trying to get to my old man. They were going to kill him and kill us. You know. So finally, we went back to New York, and we're sitting at the house out in White Plains. It's St. Patrick's Day, and they have all these cops out there. Or they have a cop, you know, protecting us. And so the old man says, "Well, why don't you take some coffee out to the cop who's guarding it?" I go out there, the guy's asleep. You know, so I said, "Well, Pops, he's asleep." He says, "Well, let's get over this. Let's forget this, you know." So we stopped that thing. He said, it was St. Patrick's Day, and the guy was Irish, you know. So he said, "Okay, this is over with." But that's the kind of experience that we had back in the old days. And anyway, we're getting close to 7. I think when you still add something to it.
yeah, let me add something to that. One of Malcolm's daughters, Gordon is a godfather to one of Malcolm's daughters. So that's how close they really
Oh, yeah.
are. And Malcolm had asked Gordon to come into the theater to hear what he had to say, and Malcolm had been all the way to Mecca and back, and his whole direction was changed. And Gordon said, I'm already on another schedule, but I'll see you tomorrow. Well, tomorrow was too late because he got killed that night. And the interesting thing, when he had gotten invited to see Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah Muhammad told him that, you know, he'd like her to do a film. But Elijah Muhammad was going to tell him how to do the film, what it ought to say, and everything, and Gordon said no. And that was the end of that.
Well, no, the old man said, well, he says, I'll give you the money to do a film, and I don't know what the X amount of dollars. And so the old man says, well, if I do it, are you going to tell me what to do? And he says, you're damn straight. I'm going to tell you whether I'm going to give you millions of dollars. The old man said no. Yeah, otherwise, he's held true to his journalistic and now, we're getting close to the end of this. Do you have any questions? Because we have some other things to do, to hand out some books and stuff. Go ahead, Rick.
You showed us some of your work.
Right.
And I know there's talk is about Gordon.
Right.
But you showed us some of your work, and I was impressed.
Thank you.
I'm now wondering, can we expect anything in a production from you? And if so, when and what?
Well, yeah.
We see that you know how to do the work.
Well, I'm working on it. I'm working on a project on the Buffalo Soldiers in Texas. And I'm also working on trying to get the GI Diary. I got some people who are interested in doing it, putting up money for the GI Diary. I kind of came out of hibernation. I was sort of retired until I realized that it wasn't time to retire. So yeah, I'm getting ready to do that. I'm working on trying to get financing for the Buffalo Soldier project. And but I've already done a film, Soup Fly. I've raised half the money for that, which is, you know, pretty good feather in the cap. the art of filmmaking is raising the money. That's where the real art
And
is.
some of the work that you showed, there was something about some of your things that you went through in the military.
Vietnam.
And I know you published a documentary on that. I've had a chance to read
Yeah.
it. I'd recommend that very highly to anybody that hadn't read it.
Well, I was gonna wait to get the Buffalo Soldier project out of the way, and, so I could really, you know, raise the money for the diary. But I looked around one day, I said, I'm getting pretty old here, so I better start working on the diary now. I'm not a young puppy anymore. And that's what I'm doing now, and trying to get people interested in. I didn't realize it was going to be that bad in Texas. I really thought Texas would have supported what I do. I went down there with the idea of trying to help develop a film industry. And I'm in Austin, and a lot of people have taken advantage of my information and kicked me out of the deal, so I didn't really give up. So now I'm dealing with New York again.
Let me add something about this that he's not going to tell you. When the Iraq War was going on, and all these young men were getting named and stuff, and I called David, I said, David, why don't you go offer your services to the Defense Department? I said, because we got too many young men who are coming back, psychologically don't have a clue where they're going. Well, what happened with GI Diary was, when he drops out of school and joins the military, of course Gordon hit the ceiling. But when he got ready to, when he got drafted, guess where they sent him for basic training? Fort Riley, Kansas. Never been in Kansas in his life. Well, anyway, when Gordon knew he was going to go overseas, Gordon gave him a diary and a camera. And if you read this book, it's like June 16th or April, whatever it is, and it tells, something.
I have to correct you on that a little bit.
And then one day, when I called him and asked him about that, he said, I've read it. I can understand why he had read it. Because you don't want to relive that if you don't have to. But I'm glad at this point that he's past that and can bring himself to do this.
That did not
I was
give
gonna
me.
say, David, on your behalf, the manuscript for Buffalo Soldier is fabulous.
Thank you.
I have read it.
Thank you.
And the GI Diary, if you can get a copy, I think it's just as relevant today
Well, thank
as
you.
it was when you wrote it.
We-
And they're both great reads and would be great films.
Would you stand up and introduce yourself to the audience?
Please
Marcia McCoy owns the collection of the artwork of my father. Would you stand up and just say hi?
Hello.
She's from Wichita, and she has the collection of the artwork. And she's of his latest work, the last work he's done, which is absolutely fabulous stuff. And I've really have been a pleasure of knowing her, and I'm trying to work with her in terms of promoting that work. Now, as far as Rick is concerned, the music, the work he saw of mine, of course that was Dad's music, and I showed them the video one day when I was there, and I want to show you, what I've done lately. And he says, that's my music. And I said, yeah. He says, you didn't ask for permission to use the music. I said, well, soon. So he says, so my sister's sitting there, and she says, oh, Daddy, if he didn't put that music in his portfolio, no one will ever hear your music. I said, thank you, Tony. See, nobody would, because I mean, the problem is that, and I don't know where it's going, because right now the music hasn't been decided upon who's going to be Now, we got Lucas put it together. George Lucas has put a $25 million building together in Chicago on the University of Chicago campus for his films. And that just happened in the last 6 months. So there might be a connection with the movies and the music down the line. But George Lucas is, he and his wife have put that together. So we're going to see some of that. Hey, how you doing back there? Yeah.
One of the things I want to say about this, and I want to praise those two ladies over there.
5 minutes.
Wichita is way overdue in telling the stories of those of you who I'm looking at around this room. Because the ones that I know real well have marvelous stories to tell. And nobody's telling them. And somehow, you know, when I did this house in San Diego, and they say, who are your architects? Wichita came. Where? You know, I mean, the other morning,
Charlie, we got 5 minutes.
right,
And we got to ask for
the
some
other
more
Saturday
questions.
morning, a young lady who graduated from Heights High School,
Yep. 4 minutes.
came from Heights High School, became one of the anchors of the Weekend Today show. There's a young man who grew up 2 houses on the other side of the hillside on Stadium Drive, who is the chief editor of the Washington Post. I mean, Wichita keeps doing this. And guess who doesn't know about it? Wichita.
That's right. Are there any questions? Because we're just about at the end of the line. Go ahead.
I'm just interested in why Gordon Parks, I presume he decided to come back and be buried with his parents,
Yes.
since he didn't love Kansas.
Yes.
And could you tell me a little bit about that? Tell us a little bit about that? How that came to pass?
Well, first of all, real quick, there's a museum now in Fort Scott, Kansas. It's called Gordon Parks Museum.
I see.
It's at the Fort Scott Community College,
I see.
Right.
Yes.
which is the oldest community college in the country. I mean, in the state. So you need to go and, you know, all of his memorabilia and a lot of his archival stuff, personal items are at that museum. And, you know, bottom line is he wanted to be next to Mama and Papa.
Okay.
You know, I mean, that, and when Charlie was able to get him back here for the Wichita, you know, college thing, that got his juices revived,
Revived, okay.
you know. And so, I mean, you know, he just came, he hadn't been back in so long. I mean, he's not, I mean, I ain't crazy about going back to New York, you know, but I'll probably end up somewhere out there.
With him.
Yeah, yeah, we're trying to keep the family.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Real quick, I would like to say real quick, I really appreciate this. I know my generation does not know a lot, and I really learned a lot, let me slow down this time, a lot from hearing you guys speak. But if your father was here now, what would he say about us, America, having an African-American president and the state of America? And I'd like to get an answer from you and Mr.
He wouldn't
McAfee.
believe it. I mean, he would believe it. I mean, I don't think he would believe it. I mean,
Believe what, that it happened?
That it happened. You know, I think that's one thing he missed. I mean, he was so far ahead of his time. But I don't ever think he ever thought that America could have a black president. He never even thought about it.
Well, most of us didn't.
Yeah.
And the night it happened, Black America cried. There was no question about it. If you saw a picture of Jesse Jackson in the crowd in Chicago, tears were just rolling out of his eyes. Most of us were saying, not in our lifetime. But here was a brilliant brilliant young man. My oldest daughter graduated from Harvard 3 years before Barack got there. 4 of the top 6 graduates in the law school at Harvard were African American. 2 women, 2 men. So when Barack got there, he wasn't, creating no path. Hell, he was following one. And so that's why I'm saying that there are so many great stories out here in our little town that the world needs to know about. And I hope this is the beginning.
Don't forget his mother was born with
Thank you both, Mr. David Parks and Mr. Charles McAfee. We have a few awards that we'd like to give on behalf of our College Access Challenge Grant, funded by the Kansas Board of Regents with the TRIO Communication Outward Bound program. At this time, 2 students, please come forward. Ostiana Collins and our Alexis Wilson, who are in our program, senior at West and a senior at Southeast. You have sophomore. Well, you need to get some advanced classes. Okay. For Gordon from David Parks, autographed copies of The Learning Tree. Read it, know it, and ready to share at our October workshop. Thank you for volunteering today. Okay, I'll ask Ms. Wilson to step forward and give her 2, and then I will do the autographed copies that David did while in Fort Scott of A Choice of Weapons. The recipients this year were Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr. Their choice of weapons against all the isms of the world and everything was music. And their Up and Away book celebrating how they've survived in the music industry as a couple, and then they shared the strength they had from their faith, and it was very overwhelming. Last year, Senator Casabon, her choice of weapons was education. That's what we're all about today with our program, reaching youth, most importantly, the elementary students this morning at the Gordon Parks Academy. He had not, Mr. Parks, been here since that opening. So I'm very proud to say that we reached out to him. We will continue our conversations with David Parks and those with Charles McAfee to tell the story of the legacy of the great Gordon Parks.
I would like to end it with thanking everybody for coming out today, and also thanking David Parks and Charles McAfee for speaking. We do have a token of our appreciation, some gifts.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
Gordon Parks Museum.
He got a beautiful mug this morning,
Gordon Parks Museum.
Wichita State mug that had the beautiful logo thing that we had it monogrammed on there for him. It's kind of hard to buy things for someone who has everything. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have enough autographed copies, except our students, for you to get a Choice of Weapons book. If you'll come over here through me, and we're officially ending. He's here to just talk and answer questions, talk and answer questions, Roma, from you. Thank you for sharing your time this evening. We will take opportunities to bring him again and let others enjoy and hear the story of the legendary Gordon Parks. Thank you.